This is the Real Christian Manliness Podcast with Isaac and Tim Ingram. Let's get manly. Okay, everybody, I've got a good buddy of mine, Daniel Stewart. I met him while I was out in California doing some training before I deployed back in 2011, and I met him at the church I went to. He was a Marine also. Still is. He's a recruiter out in, are you actually in Phoenix, or where, is it Surprise, or where are you at?
I'm in Glendale, technically.
Glendale?
It's
one big,
yeah.
It's like the Metroplex, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
So, we met, and, we went and visited a couple summers ago, and just remained friends, and I really appreciate his friendship and his testimony that he has, not only as a Christian man, but also as a Marine and a father and all that good stuff. So, how's it going, Daniel?
It's good, man. I appreciate you having me on, man.
Cool. Now, like I've told everybody, this podcast is meant for Christian men as an encouragement. And you know as well as I, there's not a lot of good, encouraging stuff for Christian dudes out there. There's a lot of negative stuff, a lot of, Al Bundy and, Homer Simpson type role models for Christian guys. So I decided that we want to get this podcast rolling just to help and even entertain Christian guys, just to give them something helpful to listen and put in their ears. So let me kick it off with the main question I've got for everybody is, what does a Christian man, or what does Christian manliness mean to you?
Honestly, it's going to sound a little cliche to you, maybe because you're a Marine as well, and you hear about integrity all the time and stuff. But obviously, there's a difference between military integrity and there's a difference between spiritual integrity. And being manly. When you think about being manly, you think about being tough. You think about being strong. You think about all those things. And I don't think there's a bigger strength really. Than maybe even going against the grain in a good way, and standing up for what's right, even when it's not popular, and all that. So that's what I think of when it comes to manliness. Is just having the integrity to know what you should and should not do, and having the strength and courage to do what you know you should do, even if it's looked upon negatively by those around you.
Yeah, definitely, and being around the type of people in the Marine Corps, and trying to maintain a Christian reputation, and being able to work alongside these guys, as well as I, that the Marine Corps was born in a bar, so that reputation just carries on through. So I found myself being the designated driver for the most part out in California whenever I was out there, and got some good stories out of that. So I can totally relate to that, going against the grain, even when everybody else is doing the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
Daniel, why is it important to be a Christian man?
Well, I think, number one, why is it important to be a Christian? Period. Obviously, the outcome, heaven or hell is definitely it's a real thing.
Yeah.
And so the importance of just being a Christian in general is there, just because you want your final destination to be to be one of happiness and joy and all that. But beyond that, obviously, I think as Christian men, the importance there is it's crucial, man, because the man, the Christian man, has been given a lot of responsibility by God, and so you think about being a man in Christianity. Obviously, you're talking about somebody that really should have the mantle, really should hold the mantle, and grab the torch and run with it, and have that spiritual integrity that we talked about, and be that Christian manliness, and exude that Christian manliness per se. But even more in detail, obviously when you get married and you're the head of the household, and you got kids that you're raising, and all that, the importance just escalates, man. So the being a single man, it's very, very important to be a good, strong Christian man, and when you get married, the importance rises a little bit, because now you have your wife that you have to lead, and ultimately, when every knee shall bow and every tongue shall confess, you're gonna answer for the direction that you led your family.
Yep.
And then when you have kids, man, it rises even more. So it's never the responsibility is never going to leave you, man. You're always going to have it. If anything, it's just going to get more and more intense as time goes on. So in a good way, obviously.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Now, you can get personal on this, or you can kind of be general on this one. But what are the most difficult areas that you have in being a Christian man, or what do you think the most predominant areas these days that it is to be a Christian man?
Honestly, man, I think for me, and I don't mind getting personal, man. I don't fake being perfect. Obviously it's very clear that I'm not. But I think in 2017, with the ability to FaceTime a buddy that is way north of you, thousands of miles away,
Yeah.
You also have the ability to get your eyes on things that your eyes shouldn't be focused on, and listen to things that your ears shouldn't listen to. And so I would say my biggest hook has always been women. I've never struggled with drinking. I've never struggled with with going out on Friday nights and engaging in activities that I shouldn't necessarily engage in. I've always been pretty straight-laced when it comes to that. But my weakness has always been women, and so the weakness that I struggle with even to this day, and I've got to set up barriers, and I've got to make sure that I build myself up to a situation where I'm not finding myself in a position to fall. Was with the pornography being readily available, and things like that. And I'm blessed with a wife that is understanding and helps out with that stuff as well. So,
well, amen.
But that's my biggest hook, and man, I think in 2017, that's probably a pretty consistent thing.
Yeah, definitely, and especially being on a deployment and the access of computers and hard drives and all this stuff that gets passed around, it's right there, even without internet connection or, things like that. It's part of the culture, and and in the military especially, but even in everyday culture these days, military set aside, it's kind of a normal thing for guys to look at what they're not supposed to be looking at.
Absolutely.
So what type of barriers, or how do you work to overcome those things personally?
You might I don't know, you might snicker at me a little bit, maybe, but I find myself really the only time that I sit still long enough to kind of get a little crazy with the phone and look up a bunch of videos, whether it be on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, is when I'm usually in the bathroom, So
yeah.
But, I stay pretty busy, and I think that's one of the ways that I combat it. I make sure that I stay pretty busy, and I'm always going, I'm always doing something, and even when I'm not wanting to, even when I want to just kind of sit and relax. The kids are commanding my attention, and work's commanding my attention. My wife, as well. So we've got, obviously, we help out with the church, things like that. So just staying busy for me is a good one. What else I've done, just with women in general, is I made a rule. Whenever my wife and I moved from Texas, we struggled maritally. We just celebrated 11 years on the 22nd of May, actually. But in the first 2-3 years, we struggled pretty intensely, and it was due to myself putting myself in situations that I shouldn't be in. And so rather than have a mindset that I'm strong enough to be able to withstand the temptation, I realize now that I'm not. And so I've just made a rule that I'm just not going to be alone with a woman, period.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to be alone with a woman. I'm not going to put myself in a situation, even if it's a woman that I completely 100% trust, like Jennifer Tellis. I know that you know her, and those that listen on the podcast probably won't. But Jennifer Tellis is a great friend of mine. I know for a fact nothing would ever go down. But I won't put myself in a situation where I need to be alone with her. So that's kind of how you build guardrails up to prevent yourself driving off the road.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that, because I've become friends with a lot of my wife's friends, and there's been times in the past to where I needed to contact one of her friends about something, but I would make it like a group message where my wife's involved in it, and just to make sure that everything's above board.
Yeah, and even I'm not sure if you can. I'm not sure, you were kind of breaking up a little bit, but even ensuring that your wife has your login information to your Facebook account.
Exactly.
And things like that. Those are just little steps. And some guys will play the whole macho card and say, "Oh, that means you're whipped," and all this. Man, that's immaturity talking, man. I love my wife more than anything in the world, so she can have whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And me being married to my wife is way more important than me not thinking I'm whipped or somebody else thinking I'm whipped. They can jump off a cliff. So.
They can go butt a stump. That's true.
Yep. So going off of that, since that's very husband-wife type of concepts, what's does a good Christian husband look like, and what does that mean to you?
You know what, man? I was actually I'm a leader of my small group in our church out here in Phoenix, and we were talking about this last night. Not last night. Honestly, man, I think all too often, we as Christians focus so much of our attention on being a good man or a good woman or a good husband or a good wife, good dad, brother, or father, and none of those things are bad. But rather than answering the question, what does a good Christian husband look like, I would just say, man, the only thing that we as Christians really ought to do is focus on our walk with God. Mm-hmm. So rather than focus on being the best Christian husband that I can be, truly my focus is on being the very best Christian man that I can be, period. And what I've found is that when I take the focus off of all the sidebar stuff that can take my attention away from my personal walk with God, what I've found is that God takes care of the rest, man. If you were to think of one person, when you think of a Christian stalwart, man, I mean, just somebody that really exudes, the Christian, persona, just always giving, a very good person, somebody that you can definitely count on spiritually and even physically. And, when you think of that one person that for me, it was my dad. My dad was my pastor. And when I think of my dad, he was a great Christian man. And when you look at those men, I don't know that it can be said that, man, this guy was a great Christian man, but really he wasn't that great of a husband, I don't think it's possible. My focus is on my personal relationship with God, and God will take care of the rest. So that's my answer to that question is what does it look like? It looks like, honestly, a good Christian husband looks like a man that's focused solely on his walk with Christ.
Well, that's good. Yeah, and the next question I have is, what does a Christian father look like? And I bet you it's about the same answer, huh?
Yeah, I mean, and again, it's not that you don't focus on that. It's not that you don't. I just know personally, man, when I focused on my wife and trying to make sure that I was the very best husband I could possibly be, it took my focus away from, making sure I was the best Christian that I can be. And dude, we almost got a divorce, man. I mean, we were a pin stroke away for 13 months, so. Yeah. And it took my pastor. Can you still hear me? Because we're reconnecting.
I got you.
Okay. It took my pastor in Texas, Pastor Chris Knowles, to call me one day and really engage in a conversation that I truly didn't want to have.
Yeah.
And he told me, Daniel, you need to quit trying to solve your problems. You need to stop trying to solve your problems. And talking to a man that's naturally a problem solver, like most of us are, mm-hmm. That was difficult to hear, But rather than focus on trying to fix my marriage, I then turned my focus on fixing my walk with God. And when I focused on that, God took care of it, man. 3 months after that conversation, Adriana told me she wanted to work it out, and here we are, 9 years later from that, 11 years total, so.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Awesome story. So, we've talked about being a Christian man and being a husband and a father and all that stuff. How do you try to balance all those different relationships and even balance having to take time for yourself? Because you have to be a solid human being to be able to be the right type of father and husband. But how do you balance and even work and all that stuff?
It's tough, man. It really is, dude. I mean, just to throw some comedy in here for a second, man. My waistline is bigger than it ever has been in my life, So it's really tough to balance. Coming from obviously a military background, we got a certain height and weight that we have to maintain, and it's tough to balance being a husband, being a father, being my daughter's soccer coach, twice a year, being my son's soccer coach twice a year, and filling billets at the church, and I'm a full-time student as well, for in college right now, and so
yeah.
It's very challenging, man, and honestly, I'm not sure that I've got it figured out, man. I don't know. I think you're probably asking the wrong person. But
I can totally agree because I don't think it was exactly because of our marriage, but just after our marriage, I definitely put on some pounds, and I'm finally now getting back to where I need to be. I'm just about 5 or 8 pounds away from where I would like to be. But in the past 5 months, I've lost a little over 20 pounds. But
it's awesome, man.
It's rough.
It happened, dude. It happens. And honestly, I think it's totally innocent, man. Because your focus does shift. Your focus does shift away from personal desires and personal gains. Your focus does shift, and it ought to shift. But,
yeah.
I think that there ought to be a balance there, and it takes some time to figure all that out. So.
Definitely. Now, shifting a little bit away from the family, since there may be some younger guys that might be listening to this, what do you think some of the biggest obstacles there are for younger guys to actually grow into manhood and to be a Christian man?
Man, it might sound a little cliche, and maybe some of the younger guys listening would possibly roll their eyes when they hear this and think it's just kind of a cheap answer, but it's the truth. I think that we all have an innate desire to fit in, and to be accepted, and all that. And I think that all too often, particularly, for the younger guys that may be going through school still, and maybe even college, you fall into this trap where you just want to have friends and you want to have acceptance so much so that the peer pressure just gets to you, man. So I think that, when you come across a young man or a young woman that hasn't figured out, what I mean by that is they're their own independent person at a young age.
Yeah.
That's called maturity, man, and it's rare. It's rare to come across that. So I would just say, just have the focus where the focus needs to be and where it ought to be and where you know that it should be, and ultimately, as you get older, you'll realize that there is a lot of respect for somebody that's willing to stand on their own 2 feet and be who they know they're supposed to be. There's a lot of respect for that. So I think that's the biggest pitfall, man. I think that just the peer pressure element, you wanting to be accepted and things like that, man. You got to look past that, and ultimately we should be striving for acceptance from God and God only.
Yeah, that's good. So what type of You've touched a little bit on some advice for younger people, but what type of advice would you give beyond that? Maybe something different that would help a man to become a real Christian man?
Well, you know what, man? I'll put it to you like this. So, and maybe this will be easy to understand. So, if you're wanting to get physically strong, the recipe is pretty self-explanatory. You know, you got to eat right. You got to go to the gym. You got to lift some weights, and you got to hit your cardio. You know, you got to hit the pavement, get some running in, maybe swim some laps, things like that. You know, if you hit that trifecta where you got nutrition in line, you got cardio in line, and you got weights in line, you know, you're really going to see some pretty stellar results. You know, you're going to get physically stronger. Ultimately, we all want, as a Christian man, as a Christian woman, we all want to be spiritually strong, and the concept is the exact same, man. I mean, if you want to get physically strong, you go to the gym. If you want to get spiritually strong, you go to your spiritual gym, man. And that's the Bible, dude. You got to hit the Bible. You got to read the Bible. You got to find yourself in the Bible daily, because that's how God speaks to us. And all too often, man, as Christians, we have one-way conversations. You know, we're saying a bunch of stuff to God, but we're not letting God say anything back to us because we don't open His Word. And so, you know, if you're wanting to get spiritually strong, man, you gotta get in the spiritual gym, dude. You gotta be at church. You know, every time the doors are open, man, you should be there. I'm a firm believer in that. Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night activities, man, you got to get there. And you know, read your Bible, pray, be somebody's accountability partner. Don't just tell somebody that you're going to pray for them just to put a check in the box and make yourself and them feel good. You know, to actually follow up with it and do it. And ultimately, that's how you get spiritually strong, man. You gotta work out spiritually just like you do physically.
Yeah, like you're saying with that trifecta, it's not very complicated. It's fairly simple, but it's not necessarily easy. You know, same thing with the spiritual walk. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it's not easy to do it, and I think that comes with some discipline and things like that. People can get caught up in the weeds with fitness and with spirituality and all the macros and the reps and all, you know, and how many chapters and how much do I pray and when do I pray? Is it at morning? Is it at night? You know, they get caught up in that stuff, but they don't take the time to actually do it. You know what I mean? So
absolutely, totally agree.
Well, man, this has been a pretty cool interview. That's all I got right now. One thing is really cool meeting new people, but it's also cool on these interviews to connect with old people, you know, that you've known for a while. And so I really appreciate you taking time. Maybe one of these days we'll come back down and visit you guys if you're still down there. But
yeah, man.
Anyway,
welcome anytime, brother.
Thank you. This has been a fun conversation. I'm sure it'll be a help to those people that are listening. All right, take care.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate you.